In the mountains of central Vietnam, there was a hill with no name, no city, no road, no strategic value on any map. But in May of 1969, hundreds of men were ordered to climb it, again and again. They fought through rain, mud, and jungle so thick the sky disappeared. They fought an enemy they could barely see. And when they reached the top, after days of blood and exhaustion, the hill was already empty. The soldiers began to call it Hamburger Hill. Not because of where it was, but because of what it did to the men sent there. 10 days of fighting, dozens killed, hundreds wounded, and 2 weeks later, the hill was abandoned. This is not a story about victory. It is a story about a war that no longer knew why it was fighting. This is Hamburger Hill. By 1969, the Vietnam War had entered a fundamentally different phase. The United States no longer believed in a quick or decisive victory. Instead, American strategy shifted toward a war of attrition, using superior firepower, air mobility, and continuous operations to wear down North Vietnamese forces over time. At the center of this strategy was the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was not a single road, but a vast and adaptive logistical network running through Laos and Cambodia, carefully concealed beneath dense jungle canopy. Despite years of bombing and ground operations, the United States failed to permanently disrupt this lifeline. The Shau Valley represented one of the most critical nodes of this system. Located near the Laotian border, it was rugged, remote, and notoriously difficult to control. American forces had launched multiple operations into the valley, and only to withdraw afterward, allowing North Vietnamese units to return and rebuild. Operation Apache Snow was launched on May 10, 1969, with approximately 3,000 U.S. troops, primarily from the elite 101st Airborne Division. Officially, the objective was to locate and destroy enemy forces operating in the valley. Unofficially, it was meant to reaffirm American battlefield dominance and prove that aggressive search and destroy operations could still produce results. On paper, the plan followed standard doctrine: air assaults, seizure of key terrain, destruction of enemy units, and withdrawal. In reality, this logic laid the groundwork for one of the most controversial battles of the war. Hill 937 was not significant because of its size or location on a map. In jungle warfare, however, high ground meant control of observation, firepower, and psychological advantage. The North Vietnamese army understood this well. For months, elements of the 29th NVA Regiment transformed Hill 937 into a fortified stronghold. They constructed interlocking bunker systems, trenches, and concealed firing positions, perfectly adapted to the terrain. These defenses allowed them to absorb airstrikes and artillery, then re-emerge to fight at close range. U.S. forces, by contrast, were forced to advance uphill through thick jungle, often with visibility reduced to just a few meters. The technological advantages of artillery, air power, and mobility were severely limited. Engagements devolved into brutal close-quarters combat. Each American assault followed a grim pattern: slow advances, sudden ambushes, heavy casualties, and temporary gains. At night, North Vietnamese troops frequently reoccupied lost positions, repaired defenses, and prepared for the next day's fighting. The battle became a grinding cycle of attack, withdrawal, and counterattack. Confusion and chaos were compounded by incidents of friendly fire, including helicopter gunships mistakenly striking U.S. positions. The battlefield fractured into dozens of small, isolated engagements across jungle slopes, trenches, and muddy clearings. What was intended to be a decisive operation instead became a prolonged struggle measured in yards and lives. The name Hamburger Hill did not come from military planners or journalists. It came from the soldiers themselves. To those fighting there, Hill 937 felt like a meat grinder, chewing up men without clear purpose or progress. One young American soldier described it as being trapped inside a hamburger machine, where bodies were torn apart by relentless machine gun fire. The metaphor captured something deeper than physical destruction. It reflected a growing sense of futility. Soldiers were ordered to assault the same ground repeatedly, suffering casualties each time without understanding the broader objective. Victory felt temporary and meaningless. As the nickname spread, it transformed the battle into a powerful symbol. It exposed the emotional toll of attrition warfare and revealed how disconnected battlefield realities had become from official rhetoric. Hamburger Hill was no longer just a location, it became a representation of the psychological erosion of American troops and the moral cost of the war itself. On May 20th, 1969, after 10 days of relentless fighting, U.S. forces finally secured the summit of Hill 937. The North Vietnamese had withdrawn into the surrounding jungle. There was no dramatic victory, no captured headquarters, no decisive strategic gain, only shattered bunkers, spent ammunition, and exhausted soldiers. Most striking was what happened next. Less than 2 weeks later, American forces abandoned the hill entirely. It held no lasting strategic value, and maintaining a presence there was deemed unnecessary. Soon after, North Vietnamese troops returned and reoccupied the position without resistance. The message was devastatingly clear. Immense sacrifice had produced nothing permanent. Blood had been spilled, but nothing had been held. Hamburger Hill became a turning point in how the war was perceived, both in the United States and within its military leadership. For the American public, the battle raised fundamental questions. What defined victory? How many lives were worth a hill that would be abandoned almost immediately? Was the strategy itself fundamentally flawed? The battle intensified political scrutiny, fueled anti-war sentiment, and forced military planners to reconsider search and destroy operations. It contributed directly to shifts toward Vietnamization and reduced reliance on large-scale ground assaults. In the end, Hamburger Hill was not simply a tactical engagement, it was a warning. It demonstrated that technological superiority could not overcome determined resistance, that firepower could not guarantee control, and that tactical success did not equal strategic victory. Hill 937 stands as one of the clearest symbols of the Vietnam War's tragic contradictions, a battle won on paper, but lost in meaning. Hamburger Hill was taken, and then it was left behind. No border changed, no war was decided, only names were added to a list that kept growing. So here is the question. Was this a necessary battle, or a warning that something had gone terribly wrong? If you were the one standing there, would you have climbed that hill again, knowing it would soon be abandoned? History doesn't always answer these questions, but it asks them. If this story made you think, leave a comment below and tell us what you believe. And if you want more stories that go beyond victories and defeats, stories about the human cost of war, subscribe to the channel, because some battles are not remembered for how they were won, but for what they revealed.